Hello there, and welcome to Isla and Friends, the season two. Heart to Heart is what we call this particular season. This is a space where we sit with people who are shaping conversations, challenging the systems, and showing up with courage and honesty. I am your host, Islamia Sodikadejo. You call me the radio girl. And this season is all about open, real conversations, not just about achievements, but the challenges behind those achievements, the social issues they are connected to, and the human stories that often get left out. Today's conversation is one that asks us to step up, be the change you want to see, and reflect on how you can be part of the solution. And if you are not new to Isla and Friends, and even if you are new from the title, you know I would definitely have a friend in the house. Today, I am sitting with a very dear friend of mine, Megan Flynn Dixon. Drum rolling!
I'm delighted
Megan,
to be here. Thanks for having me.
thank you so much, Megan. Megan is the Communication and Development Manager at SIA Elected She, and an organization working to transform who holds those who hold power in Ireland. Originally from New Zealand, Megan has been based in Ireland since 2017. Am I right?
That's right. Yeah. So what are we coming up? It's 8 years now.
8 years now. And she brings over 13 years of experience from international shipping industry into the not for profits. I'm twisting my tongue right now. Not for profit and community space. And we are going to talk about all of that. She's also a feminist at heart. And our work centers on challenging power structures, amplifying voices that are often ignored, and supporting more women, particularly those from underrepresented backgrounds, to step into leadership and political life. Megan, you're very welcome to the show.
Thanks, Isla. It's an absolute honor, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm looking forward to all your questions, but mostly I'm looking forward to having a chat with a good friend.
Okay, let's go. I know there was a time you said that people call you Megan. So give me the variations.
Ah, yeah.
And which one is the real one?
In the Southern Hemisphere, we say Megan. Everyone says Megan. So I grew up
Megan.
as Megan. And then
Megan.
I get to the Northern Hemisphere, and people say Megan, and I say, what's
Megan.
Megan? I don't know the Megan. So look, it's different. It's said different in different parts of the world, and I'm not particularly precious about it. I will introduce myself as Megan, but people
Megan.
will often say to me, "Oh, you mean Megan?" And I say, "Whatever."
Okay, correcting my name right now.
Yeah. So
Okay. So beyond the title and the pronunciation, for these listeners meeting you for the first time on this show, who are you?
oh my goodness. I mean, I like to think, and I was prompted when I came into the platform that we're using here today, StreamYard, I was prompted to put my title, and I was like, oh, do I put the See Her Elected business, or do I put the, the things I do in the community, or my own political engagement? And I left it blank, I think, because I feel like I do so many different things. And actually, at one point, I was on a workshop, and we were challenged to write positive things about ourselves. And, many women will find that difficult, and many men as well. Many people will find that difficult to write really positive things about themselves. So in this workshop, we were challenged to ask somebody we cared about for them to write these positive things. And, our mutual friend, Lindsay, I asked her, quick, I need you to text me something positive about myself. And she said that, Megan, you are an asset to our community. And that always comes to my mind, that I'm really proud that somebody thinks that I'm an asset to my community. But I also like to own it and say that I'm an asset to my community, in the sense that I'm really interested in bringing people together at my kitchen table to have conversations. I make sure that I bring soup to people who are not well. If I can help with children, pick up after school. If somebody wants me to review their CV, if they're applying for a job or a grant application, or if I can give advice on, which kind of directors should go on a board for a particular organization, or if I can review some paperwork for setting up a charity. I love to help with all of those kinds of things. If there's anything that my experience, and I have that international experience, if it is anything that I can put towards that in my community, then that's what I like to do. I like to funnel that experience into my community.
And that
So
is
I'm going to
really
say
fun.
I'm a community asset, but I love being that. I love being able to help the people around me, because that's something that I feel I can do. You know, I can't change the whole world, but I can affect the people around me.
Yeah, you can start with one person, and
Yeah.
I always say that just start with one person, and if the person that person can pass it to the next person, we can actually change the world. It just only needs to start with somebody, holding that person's hand, and I think you're doing an amazing, fantastic job doing that. Well
Thank
done.
you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's important. It's lovely to hear. Yeah.
So the last 8 years, Ireland is home. Why did you come to Ireland?
I married an Irishman.
Okay.
he's, he's very lucky. And look, when we were first married, I was living and doing my job, and I was living in Canada. And so we actually got married in Canada, and we had our first child there. And then, I took a career break, and we actually went back and lived in New Zealand for a while, which was lovely, really nice to be close to my, whānau family is the word we would use. And had kind of the early years of our eldest daughter's childhood there. But then my husband's parents are certainly getting older. They're in their 80s now. Actually, his dad is 90. So we came back here 8 years ago to basically, so that our children would have an Irish experience and to spend time with my husband's family, essentially. And it has been great. I actually can't believe it's been 8 years, that it's gone so quickly. And now our family is well entrenched in their school system and the community and our extended family. So Ireland is home now, to use the Irish phrase. We're not going to be moving again. I took my citizenship this year, which was a great achievement.
Woo! Congratulations!
Unfortunately, I was too late in getting my citizenship to vote in the presidential election. So I was devastated. So not that I want anyone to hurry up and call an election, but at the same time, I'm like, I really want to
vote. I know. And I've heard you talk about you're a New Zealander, and you are married to Irish man. But I've heard you talk about identify yourself in like 1,000 times that you are a migrant in Ireland, and you always want people to know, like, the top 3 things I want you to know about me. I'm Megan, I'm this, and then I'm a migrant. But then there's white privilege. How is that? How is being a migrant with that doesn't look migrant? Like there's a look that you expected of a migrant. Like if you are, we know the definition of the migrants, and when a migrant steps out, there's a way we expect that migrant to look, but you don't look like that. So how is that working for you, or working with you, or how is that for you?
I'm so glad that you asked that, that we can have this conversation, Isla, together.
That's why it's not heart to heart. We let it all out.
No, so it's really interesting. And look, technically I've been a migrant since I was 10. My parents moved our family when I was 10 from New Zealand to Australia. But that's a really common kind of migration, similar maybe to perhaps migration between Ireland and the UK. There's this back and forth, and people don't look different. It's not until you start digging into people's histories, a family story, that you learn that there is migration there. And then once I was in international business and shipping, I lived in lots of different countries, and actually I'm now I say this, I want to be honest, but I say this with a sense of embarrassment, that I used to refer to myself as an expat, because that's the terms and the conditions that we were on in the shipping industry. We would be placed in a role in Tokyo or in Singapore or in New York, and you would be on expatriate terms. So I never referred to myself in those years as a migrant. I referred to myself as an expatriate, which now I'm ashamed to say, because there's all this connotation around, power structures and what have you. And it was very much like that, in the sense that I would be taken to this place and paid lots of money to do a job, and then work with locals who weren't paid as much as what I was paid. So it's definitely an uncomfortable thing for me to address now. But when I came to Ireland, I got involved with the Immigrant Council of Ireland, and I just want to, I guess, give a shout out to Teresa and Val and Brian as the ex-CEO there. and the work that they have done. And I applied to, I guess the reason I was interested to get involved with the Immigrant Council was because after I took a career break and was a new parent, I got involved in refugee resettlement in New Zealand. That was kind of my first foray into doing volunteer work, let's say. So it was with the Red Cross and refugee resettlement, really amazing program that Red Cross run in New Zealand for refugee resettlement. And I wanted to do something similar when we came to Ireland in 2017, but I didn't know anything about the direct provision system. And I think in learning about the direct provision system, I was so horrified at how we treated migrants that I really understood the need to kind of fight for the rights of migrants. And I probably still didn't claim that migrant identity for myself at that point until I got involved with the Immigrant Council. And Teresa Bukowska would be amazing at, saying I am a migrant as her first and foremost, personal identifier. And she, when I applied to that program, the Leadership Academy, I said, I have massive white privilege. Like, I don't think you're the kind of person that you want on this program, because I'm not, I'm a middle class, I'm white, I'm, privileged, whatever, all these, I don't think that you want me, but I want to know what I can do, how I can help in terms of helping with migrant rights, because I think I have a great, a skill set, a valuable skill set. And she said to me, you're exactly the kind of person we want, because you have this recognition of your privilege, you understand that you're somewhat similar to these people who have migrated in the sense that you are technically a migrant, but you don't on first appearances look like that. So you have all the beforehand where nobody is going to discriminate you when you get on the bus or when you order a coffee or when you do school pickup or any of those things, because you look like everybody else. Mm-hmm. And I guess the only time that I really started to feel any kind of discrimination, and it's just one small part of my life, was around applying for jobs. So in Ireland, even though I had this international, very extensive experience, because I had no Irish experience, I was just being looked over and looked over and looked over again and again by organisations, companies, and recruiting companies. And the recruiting companies essentially said to me, "You have no Irish experience, so none of this matters for anything." And I was like, "Wow, that's so closed-minded." And it just kind of really pushed me again to be like, I think I need to be working inside not-for-profits with this view to making space for voices that are not being listened to, making space for those voices, and using my white privilege to draw attention to those voices. Okay, good. And so I kind of almost with adopting and claiming and proudly, putting with my full chest saying I am a migrant. I kind of understood, okay, I'm kind of turning my back on corporate, if you like, and the profit organizations, businesses, and really leaning into community work, because that's where I can be effective.
Thank you so much, Megan. So you talk about power structure in the international shipping field or business, and also when you came to Ireland and when you were at the Immigrant Council of Ireland, there was also that you were able to identify the privilege that you have, and which brought you to the leadership issue, and now the desire to actually help, use the advantage that you have to help people who do not have the same advantage, even though you and these people, like you're all migrants. But I want to ask, at what point did you realize that the power structure needs to be challenged? That for women, for instance, the international shipping business will be male dominated, and there's power, there's dominance. And when we look at leadership in Ireland as well, when we are talking about people who are marginalized, who are not heard, who do not have opportunity to lend their voices, there's power structure there as well. There's leadership control, and it is also dominated, dominated by gender, dominated by the majority as well. So at what point did you realize that, okay, myself, Megan Flynn, I want to do something about the power structure of dominance in politics, in leadership, and even for those seeking job, power structures everywhere?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think, I guess if we start at the beginning of my career, if you want, like, I guess even before I had a job, I would have always taken leadership roles. I'm just thinking about in sport, in school, I would have, I didn't excel in sport, let's say, but I would have put my hand up to volunteer for umpiring or coaching or volunteering to raise money or doing those kind of things. And in the end, in school, in secondary, I would have won something, like it was something called the President's Cup, but something was like the biggest award for the service to sport. But I was never the best at sport, and I was so surprised that I won this award. But I basically won it because I helped out all the time. I volunteered to umpire. I volunteered to, I don't know, take bibs off and wash them, and just help out all the time. And I was so amazed that you could be you could almost lead without being the best or the boss, without being the boss. You weren't the captain, you weren't the star player, but you could have influence by just doing what you could do, what you were capable to do. In shipping, I mean, I loved it. It was I guess it was glamorous to a point, in the sense that you traveled all over the world. You were in amazing, beautiful locations, in Papua New Guinea and in Korea and in Antwerp, and it was amazing. But you're absolutely right. I was mostly the only woman in the room. And I'm sure now, when I look back on it, and look, I worked with some amazing humans, male and female, and I worked with a lot of great men, but I worked with some absolute assholes as well. Excuse my language. I hope that's okay. And I'm positive now, when I look back on it, that I was getting paid an absolute, tiny portion of what any of the men around me were being paid. And I certainly didn't have the career progression that I saw other men have and all that kind of stuff. So when I look back at it now, and I think I have it on, I don't know, my LinkedIn profile or what have you, something like that now, I say, I had this long career in international shipping, but actually the whole time I was just a feminist, advocating for the rights of women left, right, and centre. Oh my God, how have I lost you? Oh, sorry. There you are.
Yeah.
I was just advocating for women's rights all the time. And so I think in that environment where I was more often than not the only woman in the room, I kind of learned to use my voice, and I learned to kind of challenge a little bit, and just say, it's not acceptable what you're saying. This is the way we need to do it. Or, you're not listening to what's being said. Stop talking over that person, or whatever, just kind of being a bit, whether it's, I don't know whether you want to call it bravery or bolshy or, but just learning to use my voice to get done what either I saw needed to be done, or whatever the situation was. Essentially not to be overrun by the majority that was in the room, let's say. And I don't know if I'm answering your question now, but in terms of
I think you try to, but I want you to emphasize more on the intersection between that gender, yourself as a woman, mostly the only woman or the minority among the people in the room when you are in shipping business there. So that gender, that power, and that leadership. Now, I want you to take that from the perspective of someone who was born in New Zealand, in Australia at 10, you at Canada at a point, Ireland, maybe other countries as well. From the international level, what is that intersection between these three, the gender, power, and leadership today?
Yeah, I mean, I think, women and men lead very differently. Like, we have different approaches to deal with, let's say, stress, if you're in a stressful situation. And I guess I'm not speaking for every human being, but, I can think of examples where I might have been in a situation where it was stressful. And so I burst into tears, which we never see happen. We never see, a TD or a CEO, a male CEO, or, we never see, or even, we don't see female, apart from perhaps Jacinda Ardern, but, we don't see female leaders. We don't see people burst into tears in stress when they're leaders. But certainly that would have happened to me in shipping, just a handful of times. So I guess I just make the point by saying that we lead in different ways. And I think power is kind of presented to us as you can only have power in one way. And I think what I'm trying, maybe I'm not enunciating very well, or even what I'm realizing right now is that you can actually have power in different ways. You don't have to be banging your fist on the table, using your voice the loudest, shutting down other people to have power. You can have power by being kind and helping somebody, and then, you know, having a reciprocal arrangement where then they help you later on. And it doesn't need to be this, you know, traditionally masculine idea of, you know, we're going to get it done and this is how we're going to do it and everyone else is going to be, you know, laid flat. So I think that for me is kind of that power disparity and our perception of how, you know, what we think power should look like, but actually how you can exert power. Like, even think of, if we then bring it back to gendered considerations, think about the power that your mother versus the power that your father had in the household. You know, maybe it's very, along very traditional lines, but also I would say that a mother or, you know, a grandmother, those kind of softer roles have power in the sense that they're exerting influence and leading with kindness and offering. And look, I know fathers do these things as well, but, you know, in a really traditional sense of what we might see on television or what have you, there's power in being kind. You know, you can exert power softly, essentially. And I think, you know, power exists everywhere and in every relationship for different reasons, depending on seniority or age or experience or even, you know, personal characteristics, personality traits, these kind of things. But I would like to see now us leaning into being vulnerable around how we use power, in terms of sometimes I'd like to own when I'm wrong, and I'd like to be able to say, okay, I'm learning from this situation, and then gain respect in that way, rather than, you know, drawing a line in the sand and saying nobody can cross it. I think opening ourselves to vulnerability is really important. So then, in terms of the migration piece and you know, relations between, let's say, yourself and myself, Islamia, you know, with what my white privilege and your, you know, coming from Nigeria, being a proud Black woman, I think, you know, for me, I want to remain open to learning, what does that look like for you and I? How do we balance this in our relationship? What can I learn from you? How can I help you? Where are the parts where I can use my white privilege to help you, but where are the parts where I could be vulnerable and open myself up, and you can tell me your truth, you know?
All right. Thank you so much, Megan. Now, I'm still on power, but this time around, women in power. And that will bring us to Sia Elected She. And for anyone that hasn't heard about Sia Elected before for the first time, what problem does this organization solve or exists to solve?
See Her Elected are funded by national government to bring more women in rural Ireland into local politics. So it's a very specific channel that we work in. So rural Ireland has a much lower representation of female councillors. We're not talking about national politics because there is a quota there to have, you know, a certain percentage of candidates put forward by each party before they get elected. But at a local level, there is no quota. And while in some city constituencies, Dublin and Cork particularly, there is much closer to parity. I think there's one constituency, perhaps South Dublin, that has 50-50, but all the others are less than 50%. And in the rural constituencies, there are a lot of communities with all male representation. Donegal is the worst. I think there's 3 female councillors out of 38 up there in Donegal. Mayo was next on the list. You know, Galway, where we are, is not too far down the list either. It's really the most rural county, so that's kind of Midlands, Northwest, certainly Kerry, and there's a few patches in between, which has the most overrepresentation of men. And so See Her Elected are funded by national government to provide training and support and mentoring to try and change that.
Thank you, Megan. Why is it important for women to be represented in politics?
Yeah, great question. Really
Because
great.
let me bring back to, you said that if you feel stressed, women, we burst into tears, we cry it out. They see this as weakness. So you go for maternity leave, you're pregnant for 9 months and all that. So why is it important for us to get involved in politics?
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing. Like if you look at local council, and the reason that I love, the idea of getting more women into local council, if you open up your door where you are in the studio there today, if you open up the door and look out on the street, you're going to see the roads, you're going to see the street lights, you're going to see a mobile library van driving by, you're going to see a poster for an arts festival which is coming up, you're going to see a planning notice which is stuck up on the fence for a new development across the road. You're going to see all these things which are managed by local council. So it's everything out the front doors. It's not schools, it's not hospitals, it's not the things run by national. All that stuff out our front doors. And also, when you open up the front door on your studio and have a look out on the side of the street, you're going to see roughly 50% men and 50% women. So, and look, we're not even talking about the international, representation, the diversity, or indeed the mixed ability, or LGBTQI plus, any other types of diversity here. You're just thinking about men and women. You see 50% men and 50% women in our population. That's what our statistics say. So to have only men making decisions about, let's say, making decisions about those roads, and what kind of footpaths we're putting in place. Are those footpaths suitable for a woman who's pushing a double-barreled stroller with 2 kids and then holding the hand of a 5-year-old? Are those footpaths big enough for that, Are those footpaths big enough for the woman who's got her carrier in front of her so she can get down the street? If we have women involved in the design of what our footpaths and roads and bus stops and park benches look like, they will look a lot different from what they look like right now. And then what happens for the councillors that are elected to our council is that they're then appointed to a bunch of other community committees. So there might be there'll be a regional committee on the service of health services. And if the councillors are all men, mostly men, then it's going to be mostly men appointed to the joint policing committee or the community safety committee or the health service committee or those kind of things. So then again, you've kind of replicating this over-representation of men on all these committees, which are making decisions about the lives of men and women.
Women.
It's not representative, and you're going to have poorly made decisions, basically.
So if this is the points you have raised are quite very important, and I agree with you totally. Then why do women remain underrepresented then? Yeah,
so traditionally, throughout all of government, but also business, any kind of like official type organisation has traditionally been arranged around times that suit men. So the meetings will be times that suit business hours. But they don't suit school drop-off, and they don't suit kindergarten pickup, and they don't suit activities in the afternoon, school training and your soccer training and piano and all this kind of stuff. So the meetings tend to be times that are not suitable for men. The other thing that happens is they often have meetings in the city. So I was on with a group recently, and they're saying, we can't get women to come to our meetings in the middle of Dublin City at 8 p.m. on a November evening. I say, do you think these women feel safe going into these places at 8 p.m. on a very different again power dynamic of who gets the right to be present in these spaces and who feels comfortable to come into these spaces? So in See Her Elected, what we do for our trainings is we repeat our trainings at a variety of times, 7 o'clock in the morning and a lunchtime and an evening and mid-morning, repeat them. And we change up the days and the times. So sometimes if I can't make it on a Tuesday because I've got soccer on that day with my 8-year-old, I can make the following week on the Thursday at 11 o'clock, when I've got a break at work or something like that. So offering flexibility is not something that traditional organisations have done, either in business or in government. But it's very important to fit around women's lives. And why is it important to fit around women's lives? Because women have traditionally been the carers of young children, the carers of school children, and the carers of the elderly as well. I know there are men doing caring roles, but the point is these meetings that are being arranged for council or, various committees are also not going to suit those male carers. So, while we have an overrepresentation of men in county councils, we have an underrepresentation of men in caring roles. it'd be nice to see that change as well.
Yeah, and I would like to add the carer of men as well.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
by the time it goes for that 1 a.m. meeting, it's coming back, it wants the food warm and nice and on the table.
Yeah, how
You know.
many men that we see that are all, very, very successful in whatever pursuit it is, are incredibly supported by an amazing woman. I mean, that's what allows that to happen.
Yeah.
Um,
So these challenges are there. How do women push back against them?
I think it's so interesting, and I think it happens in all of our lives. I mean, I remember as a young, I say young, but as a new mother, let's say that when I had my first child, I really did, even though I had been an ardent feminist my whole life, and read all my Betty Friedan and intersectional feminist text and all this kind of stuff, and rallied against what I saw in the shipping industry. I still thought that, oh gosh, I better have the house clean when my husband gets home from work. I still had that thought, because of what we see on television and what have you. And look, I guess I like to have a clean house. It's nice to have a clean house. It's nice to enjoy the space that you're in, and it makes me feel good. And like right now I work part-time and my husband works full-time, and that works really well because we can make it all work for the children and do all those soccer drop-offs and all that kind of stuff. So I have also, I also fall into that, and I know you do too, Isla. You fall into that. I'll do these things and you mow the lawn and take the rubbish out, and I'll cook during the week and you cook on the weekend. And
Yeah, I know.
we fall into these things, and in some sense I would love to challenge it and flip it on its head. But what would that look like? Would that look like that I stayed in the shipping industry and I was traveling the world and I was home, one weekend and three, or is that what I wanted? Do you know what I mean? Like I think it's a really hard question to answer. And again, it brings me back to this sense of does power have to be what we see on television and what we see on the news, with this power banging the fist and resolute and nobody shall challenge me? Or can we be vulnerable to ask those questions and have those difficult, uncomfortable conversations around, help me, I need help here, we need to do this together.
Yeah.
Like I say, I grew up seeing sitcoms on television that presented, mum and dad and three kids and very defined roles. And I know there's variation within that. But if we want anything different, then we do have to have uncomfortable conversations, with the people we love.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think talking about uncomfortable conversations, it will kind of make me want to ask tokenism, box ticking, just to fill in women, just to fill in migrants. These conversations are coming up in our community. That's okay. We women, I personally, I believe we need to come prepared. It is time for more women to step up into politics, but at the same time, when we get there, when we have this opportunity that we've been clamoring for, that we continue to clamor for, we better get it right. We better not, disappoint ourselves or anyone. There are so many decisions or policies that need to be changed because they were created or they were made from the lenses of men, and they are impacting on women. They are not impacting on women so well. So when women are well represented, we can make changes. But then when you are not prepared, when you are there because now Sia elected is supporting you, you cannot afford to let Sia elected down. We are not taking the box, we are not doing tokenism, we are just saying that, are you the right person for this particular position? That is my own perspective. What is yours?
Yeah, I think what do I think? It's great. So I think So, sometimes I get overwhelmed and overstressed, and and maybe I get sick, or whatever. I don't feel great, and you wonder, how did I get to this point? How did I get to this point of being of working myself so hard? Of saying yes to so many projects that I can't deliver on, or I've made myself unwell by delivering, by doing too much, by working too hard. And yeah, and that absolutely happens. And I know it happens to you as well. And like anybody that takes on a lot of projects, this happens from time to time. And I think every time it happens, I think, but it shouldn't happen. It should be that I recognize that I can't do all of these things, And the other side of it is sometimes I feel so overwhelmed with a sense, maybe I'm not sick, but I feel so overwhelmed with a sense of there are so many things that I want to do, and I feel so impacted by, maybe a parent that I heard that can't afford the school fee, the soccer fees, and how could we raise money for that person? Or maybe that school that I heard is not doing so well with their finances, and what could we do? How could we? And I feel so overwhelmed with, like, there's so many things that I want to do, and I can't help everybody. What can I do? And the only thing I can do is bring it back to, who can I help? What actually thing can I do? Because I understand there's something with, like, psychology or what have you, that if you're feeling overwhelmed, and look, we could use climate as an example. If you're feeling overwhelmed with, or we could use immigration, or, refugee crisis, or what have you, any of these kind of, Palestine, let's use Palestine or Uganda as an example. If we feel so overwhelmed by our inability to do anything about, Uganda, the war in Uganda, if we feel so overwhelmed by that, you could either dwell in that overwhelm, you could either dwell in that, like, sense of hopelessness, or you could find one thing to do, and maybe that is to find a really good book that's been written about the civil strife in Uganda and what's happening there. Maybe you could write about that. I'm saying Uganda, but I'm thinking Congo. Sorry. Maybe you could find something about Congo and read all about Congo, and educate yourself, and then talk to one person. And just that act of doing that one thing actually will make you feel better. And then you won't be so despondent, and then you can possibly do one more thing. So if we look at politics and the involvement of women, if you feel so overwhelmed with, oh my God, the misogyny and the toxic nature of politics and the overrepresentation of men and the action of the parties and all this, I can't do anything about that. If you can do one thing, if you can find one female, candidate who you can possibly reach out to and say, hey, I really love what you're doing, it's great. That's one small thing that you've done. So by way of saying this, what I'm saying is, yes, it's overwhelming and it's huge, but the way that we can make ourselves feel better about it is to find one tangible thing, one tangible action that we can do. And then you almost trick your brain into saying that, okay, well, it's not as bad as I was thinking, so maybe I can do another thing, and then you can kind of build yourself out of it. But we don't want that place in the first place. So how do we teach ourselves not to take on so many, not to overwhelm ourselves in the first place? How do we learn to say no? How do we protect ourselves? How do we take that break ahead of, burning out, so that we're ready? And I think that's a big difference between what we see displayed externally. It's like, go, 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 do all these things, achieve, achieve, achieve. But actually, I think taking a rest, having a day off, saying no to things. No, Megan, I can't come to your morning tea that you're talking about today. It's tomorrow. I'm too busy. Don't be ridiculous. Like, that's perfect, I said no to somebody recently about volunteering or something, and she was like, I'm so glad you said no. Thank you. That's awesome.
That's a new one.
That's fantastic. Isn't that great?
Yeah, that's great.
So next time somebody says no to me, I should have said that to you yesterday. I'm going to say, awesome. So glad you said no. I'm so glad you're protecting your space and your energy.
Yeah. And talking about saying no, putting a lot of things together, overwhelming work. What does your work focus on at the CI elected?
What is my work?
As a communication and development manager, what do you do? What are your roles and duties and the communities that you work with?
In all of our classic style, when I started, I was like, I've never been communications manager before. I don't know how to do this. But actually, I did a great thing with See Her Elected. They got me a communications coach, which I never knew was a thing. So, it's like a business coach or a fitness coach or, a mental health coach or whatever. It's a communications coach. So somebody who's really, really good at doing communications. So I've been working with her for a couple of months. And really it's about my confidence, so I don't have a journalism background, so I didn't feel like I knew all these different journalists. But now we, See Her Elected, we launched our guidebook to running in the 2029 elections in November. If you follow any of our social medias, you'll see all that there. The launch is available to watch on our YouTube channel. So she coached me through all of that, and that was actually fabulous. I ended up speaking to lots of different journalists all over the country to get them involved in the launch and covering it. So I feel really good about that now, and I'm going to do a few more sessions with her in the new year with my communications coach, just around, because another part of my role will be teaching that to people who are looking to run their own campaigns. How are they going to do their own communications? And we know that if you look at social media, that landscape changes every day. You've really got to keep on top of that. Whereas the traditional media, print, radio, and television changes a little less. So yeah, I feel really good about managing that communications part. The development I was really excited about, because that is what I would have done in the past, certainly in community organisations and when I was in shipping. And development, what does that mean? It means, essentially growing your reach, finding new areas to operate in. So what I'm really interested with the development piece is, again, making space for those voices that are seldom listened to, making space for those to be heard. So reaching out, we worked with Danao, who did the Miss Africa Ireland Awards. We worked with her last year.
Mrs. Africa.
Yeah, we worked with her last year, which was fabulous. And we do lots of work with the National Traveller Women's Forum, but also I'm trying to find those privileged white women who currently don't feel or don't see a place for engagement with politics in their life. You might say that there's no pain point for them, in the sense that they are not adversely affected by local politics, such that they feel the need to do something because the status quo really, really suits them. Because they are in receipt of privilege by the status quo. So I'm trying to find out, how do I reach those women? So we did a spread in a glossy magazine in the Examiner a wee while ago, which was kind of a lifestyle type spread. We did a fashion shoot, not a fashion shoot. It felt like a fashion shoot, but we put on different outfits, and just bringing See Her Elected to different areas. And one thing I'm going to work on in 2026 is actually reaching out to basically elite sporting organizations, because my understanding is that if you look at women leadership across the globally, in all countries, in all regions, the biggest indicator of success in leadership, either in the profit or not for profit, so government or business, the biggest indicator for women in involvement in leadership is actually excelling in sport. So that means maybe she was an amazing track runner, or maybe she was a swimmer, or maybe she played water polo, or maybe she played soccer, or whatever. But if you're looking for one indicator, that's what it is. So I know that the likes of Swim Ireland or Camogie Ireland or whatever are not going to necessarily want to take a political bent. But if they're women, if they have elite sportswomen who are then looking to transition out of their, out of their sporting career, what they come into and where can they pick up a leadership role. And if you look at a lot of our, I'm not going to be very good at listing off the names, but I think we've had a few, MEPs and politicians who indeed have come through sport. And look, the big parties, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, would be well known for tapping sports people to say, will you stand for us as a candidate? So that's the development piece, is trying to find out, where is she, See Her Elected, not currently being talked about. We joined Network Ireland, let's say, which is a big women's organisation for a business. Where is she not currently talked about, and how could we get into those conversations?
Okay, I think that is a good one. So when you work on the development like that, you reach out, you encourage marginalized and the privileged women as well to step up and, be the change they want to see, especially in politics. Do you think when women come together, are women required to Do you think the system or ground, the system we currently have in Ireland, are these women coming up together, getting more representation in politics? Are women coming to reform the system, or you think the system need to be rebuilt to be rebuilt entirely?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is, in terms of Ireland's, position as a a very rich country. Let's be honest, as a whole, unless we were to encounter some horrendous disaster, like COVID, or something much worse than that, the system is not going to be rebuilt. We're not going to have a ground up situation, and I've always been a big believer in this, and this is kind of why I kind of thought, from my experience in business and then coming into not-for-profit and kind of slowly getting involved in politics, was that if we want to affect change, there are mechanisms for us to do that within. So we need to know how those mechanisms work. We need to understand the system and find those opportunities for change. In another life, perhaps I would have loved to have been a lawyer, to be able to understand, every letter of the law and figure out where are the opportunities for us to bring, a legal challenge to the status quo and make improvements. I really admire that, because I think I'm practical. I'm very, I don't think that the system is going to burn to the ground and we're going to start again. That's not going to happen. And I think if it did, we'd kind of encounter a whole new set of, there might be disparities around, I don't know, suddenly people with double jointed thumbs become the power structure or something, because yourself, Isla, if we have any group of 10 people, if you think of 10 people and put them in a room, there's a certain dynamic depending on those, essentially the power structures, but the relationships and how everybody's feeling on the day. And you'll have but if you've got a different 10 people, it would be a really different group of people. It would be it's literally a different group of people. My husband teaches, and he will often say, this cohort, 3rd year, 4th year, whatever, are so different to this other cohort that I've got. And it's really around the dynamics of those power structures and relationships, and then how it forms over time. Was there a power outage, so we all had to be in a bit of a mode where we were kind of, on alert, or was it a really cruisy day and we had a lovely summer and it never rained, or was it really cold and everybody was uncomfortable in the room, so people got a bit antsy, So I don't think I don't think rebuilding from the ground up is either realistic, but I also don't think it would provide the perfect solution, because you'd have a different set of power struggles here. I'm a firm believer in democracy, obviously. I think we have this lovely system, which in theory says that everybody has the opportunity to have their voice heard. And I can see that in action. And I'll give you an example. We've been in Ireland for 8 years. We've been living in this house for 7 years. And so our kids are in the school locally. And I would have volunteered with the Parents Association, and I would have, helped with drop-offs for other kids, or taken soup to sick parents, or whatever. I would have just done all those things that come naturally to me. So then when it came around a couple of years ago for the elections for the school board management, I said, I can do that. I can absolutely do that. And so I literally talked to a whole bunch of people and said, if I went for school board of management, would you support me? And they said, yep, absolutely. I said, great, here's the date when it's on. You come along and you vote for me. And they did. And sure enough, I'm on the school board, which is wonderful. I'm so delighted to have the support of those parents.
That support of the community, yeah.
But it wasn't very hard. It wasn't very hard. Yes, it required me to say, I think I can do this. Do you think I can do this? Get them to say yes. And then say to them, come on this day, And it was my first experience of being like, it's not actually that hard to essentially, and now you're on the school board. So now you can have your voice and say, well, hang on, what about the kids that aren't Catholic? Or hang on, what about the kids that, it doesn't suit them to, whatever the thing would be. So I think I'm a firm believer in learning the way that the structures work, and then working within those structures to affect the change that we want. And I think, if you look at things like Zach Polanski in the Mandami in New York or what have you. Like that's exactly examples of that. Is like learn how the structures work within the structures that are there, and achieve the change that you want to see in the world.
Yeah, thank you so much, Megan. And talking about structure, if there's one particular structure that you think Ireland needs to remove, or that you feel that, okay, this is frustrating and challenging more representation of women in politics, what structure would that be?
Such a good question. I mean, probably probably parties in terms of the party culture, the culture inside each individual party. And indeed, I was speaking with some people recently, and they were saying, oh, why is there an over-representation of men in all of the parties, with the exception of Social Democrats, let's say? Why is there an over-representation of men in all those parties? And, somebody had said that they'd read a book recently, and seemingly politics in every or party membership, let's say, in every country, everywhere in the world, tends to be predominantly, in the majority of cases, it's made up of the majority of the dominant culture. So although Ireland is 50% men and 50% women, the dominant culture, let's say, in terms of the who's on the news and who's and who's in the newspaper and who's singing songs on the radio and who's our prime minister, who's our Taoiseach and all these kind of things, that is, white men. So that's the majority of the membership in our parties. So then what that means is if the majority of the membership of the men in the parties is white men, then that's who they're electing and that's who they're supporting and all those kind of things. So See Her Elected would work very closely with a lot of the parties to be like, what are you doing to achieve 50-50 candidacy? What are you doing, And overall, the parties are all trying, and they're really, maybe it could be said to be tokenistic in some sense. They're saying that they want to do these things, but the membership on the ground is who has, again, in a democratic sense, the membership on the ground is who has the right to elect these candidates. And so it becomes men that get elected, So, and I think that's not because any individual man, if you speak to them and say, this, Islamia, she'd do a great job. Yes, she would do a great job. Look at all the things she can do. Oh my God, she's amazing. Like this, we would absolutely, if you spoke to any individual person, then you or I would get that support. But it's because it's never been seen that there's been a female, black hijab wearing representative in Galway County, that we think it can't happen, So it's this really hard thing for men and women. If you haven't seen it happen, it's really hard to make it happen.
I think it's maybe hard to actually achieve.
Yeah, and
we have like 4 minutes to go now, so I'll just give you quick round, firecracker questions. Okay. So what is the most challenging part of your job?
Maybe dealing with parties.
Dealing with parties, okay. What keeps you hopeful? Because we talk a lot of things that need to be changed, a lot of challenges today. But what keeps you hopeful that when people feel slow, resistance feels strong? What keeps your hopes high?
We make a point of calling each person who signs up to a new workshop to say, hi, how are you? My name's Megan. I'm so glad you joined the workshop. And it is so nice to speak to that woman on the other end of the phone who's like, wow, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you called. I've got a question about this. And, to hear that hope, but also to hear them be excited and to know that we're supporting them.
That you are doing something right. So if there's one thing or one rule that you can change in politics or public leadership tonight, what will it be?
Oh, this is hard. What would it be? It would be, I would say, put in quotas for local elections.
What did you say that, Adi?
Put in quotas to have 50% candidacy for local elections.
Okay, that would be great. What is one truth about leadership that is not said loudly enough?
That it can be done softly.
Oh, really? So I want you to finish this sentence. Women don't need permission to
be themselves.
Oh, I love that. So for anyone listening today, what do you want them to take away from our conversation today?
Your voice is needed in local politics, and See Her Elected is here to help you.
Okay. And I have two questions. I'm just going to ask you one, so you can pick number one or number two, and I'll take that, and that'll be the final question. So it's your choice.
Okay.
So what
Two.
number?
Number
What?
two.
Number two. Okay. What truth do you know now that you wish more people heard earlier in their lives?
That you deserve to be heard. Yeah, that you deserve to be heard. That your input is really, really valid, and your ideas that you bring to the table are valuable, and people want to hear them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Megan. And that brings us to the end of today's edition of Isla and Friends Season 2, The Heart to Heart. Thank you so much, Megan Flynn Dixon, the Communication and Development Manager with SIA Elected, for sharing your story with honesty and from your heart. Conversation like this reminds us that leadership, change, and belonging don't come from perfection. They come from courage, community, and choosing to show up as you are. If something you heard today stayed with you, I invite you to sit with it and make good use of it. My name is Islamia Sodekadijo. You call me the radio girl. And like I always say, love yourself, believe in yourself, take good care of yourself, pamper yourself, take yourself seriously. Never accept anyone's definition of you. Forgive yourself if you have to, and keep yourself safe. And always remember to smile. Smile is therapy, smile is charity, and smile is love. Goodbye, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye now.
GoCom Radio, the people's voice.